Thank you for joining us on the test bench. Today we're going to be building the ultimate 4K gaming / productivity machine. We'll be using a Ryzen 9 3900X, 64 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz Corsair Vengeance RGB RAM, an Asus Strix RTX 1080 Ti OC, an Asus Strix X570F motherboard, a Corsair H100i RGB Platinum SE, a 2TB Samsung QVO SSD, a 1TB Intel 660p NVMe drive, and we're mounting all of it in a Corsair Crystal Series 680X RGB. For good measure, we're going to throw 3 more Corsair LL120s and a couple LL140s in there too. Also, we'll be reusing the drives from my previous computer, the Magnum Opus. If this goes correctly, we should just need to boot it up and not reinstall anything. As with all the computers we build, this one has a name. We're calling this machine Lightbringer. Before we begin, let's get into the reasoning behind the parts we're using. I have a 4K monitor, but up until now, I was using a GTX 1070 to drive it. While a 1070 performs exceptionally well for 1080 and 1440, it performs dismally at 4K for any games made after 2015. The only thing on the market that can reliably drive 60 FPS and 4K for newer games is a 2080 Ti. I'm not waiting for the RTX 3080 Ti or Big Navi to come out, because they don't have confirmed release dates. I chose the Asus Strix version so I could sync the lighting with everything else. I chose the R9 3900X because it performs in games on par with the Intel i9-9900K at 4K, while the additional threads and AMD's magic sauce make it superior for use in Adobe Premiere. The reason I didn't go with the 3950X is the performance games in games is negligible, and I don't have a workflow that would inspire me to spend an additional $330 on 4 more cores. The 64 gigabytes of RAM is mainly so I can scrub through 4K footage timelines without slowdown. Also, the amount of RAM combined with the processor cores should allow me to use the computer for non-intensive tasks while Premiere renders video. As for virtually everything else being Corsair, I'm an RGB fanatic and I like using Wallpaper Engine, and also like how games like Far Cry 5 and Metro Exodus interact with Corsair peripherals. What made the decision is I already own several Corsair products and wanted to reuse them. Really, I just wanted to ensure that all the RGB inside and outside of the computer can sync correctly. There are several products that sync with Asus Aura and other RGB implementations that can do the same thing. Given the depth of the case we're using, I'm choosing to install our CPU, RAM, and NVMe drive on the motherboard prior to mounting the board in it. When working with a motherboard outside of its case, placed on top of the box it came in, it's a nice anti-static surface that won't harm it. There's a lot to like on the Asus Strix X570F, like the steel-reinforced PCIe slots, the heatsink VRMs, and the built-in heatsink with thermal pads for NVMe drives is one of the neatest parts. A feature that's a rare treat. The I/O cover is already built in, so you don't have to run the risk of cutting your hands up or wrestling the I/O shield into place correctly, only to find out you have a metal prong stuck on one of your ports, so you either have to do some surgery with tweezers or pull the whole board out and start again. Or is that last part just me? The Corsair Crystal Series 680X is wider than normal because it has a side chamber to hold the PSU and cabling for the included Lighting Node Pro. As the kids say, she thick. It has a lot of nice touches we'll explore as we go. One thing that is not a nice touch is that the manual seems to have been outsourced to whoever makes instructions for IKEA. For a $250 case, it should have had better instructions than this for removing the glass side panel. The first thing I'm going to do before work begins is remove this side door by unscrewing the screw retaining the top hinge, then lifting it off. Next, I'm going to remove the thumb screws holding the top pane in place and remove it. And lastly, I'm going to pop the filter out of the bottom. Once those are all safely away, I'm going to remove the retention plate for the top fans and radiator and put it aside. Next, we'll install the motherboard. The standoffs come pre-installed. All we need to do is settle the board on them and start screwing it down. We'll replace the fan in the back with an LL120 as exhaust. There's nothing wrong with the original fan, it's just in this build we want all the fans to be RGB. While we're at it, we'll install the LL140s in the bottom as intakes. The 2080 Ti will be vertically mounted, which causes issues with airflow, and this will help by supplying it directly with cool air. The next logical step is cooling the CPU. Our H100i already has thermal paste on it, so we don't need to apply any to the R9 3900X. This cooler, unfortunately, uses the plastic rails that come with AM4 connectors, so what you see next is a condensed version of me wrestling it into place. We were going to put the radiator in a push-pull configuration, since we have the extra fans. Push-pull is when you sandwich a radiator or air cooler in between two fans oriented in the same direction. The fans nearest the inside of the case push air through the radiator, while the fans on the other side assist by pulling the air through. This increases cooling efficiency. Unfortunately, setting up this radiator like that makes the bottom fans hit the VRM heat shield at the top, so for now we'll install with just one set of fans on the bottom, but I have a trick up my sleeve for later. Now that we've got her warmed up in the front, we get access to the rear. With the 680, you mount the PSU on its side with the fan pointing towards the vent, and screw it into the case in the traditional manner. For our next trick, we're installing our 3 SSDs and 2 hard drives. The 680's toolless drive sleds are our friend here. We pop the drive sleds out, set the drive in, and pop the sleds back in. And at this point, we're ready to wire things up. We're doing it in style with cable mod replacements for the original RMX 850 cables. For our final step, we're installing the GPU. We want to plug in our PCIe extension cable, then remove the back cover from the case. Next, we plug the GPU into the riser and mount it in place, being careful to situate the cable so it doesn't get caught in the fan blades. Then, we attach the power cables. Now for the exciting part, firing it up for the first time. We don't want to put the side panels back on yet, because that's bad luck until you confirm the machine boots. And she does. Part of the conceit here is I cloned my old primary SSD to the NVMe drive before we started building, and everything fires up exactly like the old system. And now for the final bit. I've installed my pull fans for the radiator outside of the system and placed all the side panels back on. Told you I had a trick up my sleeve for that one. My prediction is Lightbringer is going to carry me well into the decade with 1 or 2 graphics card updates. I say that because if the rumors about the RTX 3080 Ti and Big Navi are true, we'll be looking at a situation where specs are too impressive for me not to buy. What I'd like to leave you with is a little bit of B-roll of Lightbringer living up to its name, with the graphics card mounted both vertically and horizontally. I'm not sure which I like the look of better, would appreciate your input. If you haven't noticed yet, I've upgraded my camera and kind of want to show it off too. And that'll wrap it up for today. Please do tell me which positioning of the graphics card you like better. And join us next time on the Test Bench, where I benchmark Lightbringer and compare it to its predecessor, the Magnum Opus. Like this video and subscribe to the Test Bench. Feel free to join us on Facebook. Back us on Patreon if you want to help us show you more cool stuff. And follow us on Twitter. Thanks for watching. And be sure to check out our other videos.